Why doesn't this thing have a solid-state battery? Why doesn't the new R2 have lithium iron phosphate? How crazy are those donut claims really? Why would you unveil a product at CES if no one's ever seen it validated? What does my uncle have to do with this? Is it particle size? Is it a capacitor? What's the difference between a battery and a capacitor? Why are all these questions so important?
Around the 29th of December, my New Year's resolution was to schedule all my videos and have a great idea of what I was going to release in January. It was a lot. Sarcasm, research, awkward charging behavior, more sarcasm. It was beautiful. But then this battery in a Louis Vuitton hat showed up, and I had to change all my plans. This donut battery has gotten a lot of coverage, and you may be done with it, but its unveiling has highlighted the fact that we as EV owners and enthusiasts don't know enough about the batteries in EVs, and that's the main goal of this video. So if you've still got questions, this is the right video. If I've learned anything from buying a Fisker Ocean and then realizing how big of a mistake it was and then telling the world it was a mistake to make sure they didn't make the same mistake, it's that it doesn't exist until you're holding it in your hand. And I'm going to be skeptical of the Donut Labs claims in this video because I spent 6 weeks researching, and with the information I've obtained, I'll prove to you how hard solid-state batteries really are to make. I've also got 2 guesses as to what this product might be. One guess is a product with the performance numbers that Donut claims, and another is a product that will meet the manufacturing and materials claims that Donut makes. And once we're all caught up on what I've learned, I'll reveal those. The difference between it's ready for production and coming in 2028 is nothing. If you can't hold it, it's not real. So, is it real?
Unclear.
Has it been validated, or did someone just put it together
in a cave with a box of scraps?
We honestly don't know, but let's do a who, what, where, when, how for the sake of time. You've got Tuomo Lehtomäki. That's the brother of Marco Lehtomäki, who is the CEO of Verge Motorcycles. But before we need a face, we need the money. That's the Aura Ring guy. His name is whatever this says. Here, I'll pronounce it for you.
Petteri Lehtola.
His net worth is like 11 billy.
Billy.
And of course we need the brain, and that's this person, also pronounced
Bela.
Booscoot.
She's the chief scientist at Nordic Nano, and the companies, Verge Motorcycles, Donut Labs, Nordic Nano. If we are going to be skeptical, we should be skeptical because we have at least a high-level understanding of what the market is like already, and this discovery doesn't fit into that understanding. At one point, Fisker was a big deal too. The Tesla killer. Up to 700 miles of range in 1 minute, if you want.
This allows you to charge in 1 minute and get more than 700 miles if you want.
And for those of us who were more excited to have an alternative than we were skeptical about the man and his past, this upswing here can show that rolling a truck downhill can convince an entire population that something is very real for at least 6 months. Welcome to the worst timeline. I was certainly enticed by the desire to be one of the first people that reported on this. It's a game-changer technology that, coincidentally, every supplier, OEM, manufacturer involved in anything energy is currently working on also. I wanted to immediately write it off as vaporware because there's no prototype.
This battery is here. That's why we brought it. I sold my scientists. We got to bring it CES, show it, not just talk about it.
No. These batteries are available today. Not just available for OEMs to look at in the lab, and not just available to prototype with, but available for real production.
Or because the stats were stupid.
Solid-state battery, all solid states, 100% green, 400 watt-hours per kilogram. This pack charges from 0 to full in as low as 5 minutes. As low as 5 minutes. It's designed for 100,000 cycles. At minus 30 degrees Celsius, Donut battery retains over 99% of its capacity. Heating the cells beyond 100 degrees Celsius. That's 200 Fahrenheit. The result stays the same, over 99% capacity retention. When it's damaged, it won't ignite and burst into flames. Lower cost at the pack level and lower complexity. Two-wheelers, passenger vehicles, fleets, drones, robotics, marine, and even stationary storage. And that's the new vehicle skateboard platform with Donut motors, Donut OS, and the Donut battery.
Like, what? So I did some more digging, and then I realized there was no validation of these statistics. I now have even more desire to write it off as a scam. Then I considered market factors, consumer demand, more articles and videos. And the more details I uncover, the harder it is for me to believe it. There's a lot of reasons why, and we'll start with the CEO. Very recently, a company he's also responsible for came out with a super AI. One large language model is simply a single neuron in this new super AI with this name that I can't pronounce. The capabilities are the sum of all the AIs on Earth, and even more, our CEO exclaimed. However, that's kind of the last we heard of that. If you Google this guy, a site called Crunchbase will show you that he is on the board or has an advisor role at 4 different companies, one of which is venture Bonsai Company. He's the chairman of the board. Well, Venture Bonsai Company really only comes up on LinkedIn, and their website is literally nothing. But this guy is no stranger to selling companies off. It was successfully done by him in 2021, and absolutely appropriately named here, AppGyver, was sold to SAP. What happened? Well, acquisition. We'll never know.
Guys, before I defuse this bomb, there's something you need to know.
You're on the Epstein list.
All over it.
Like every third page.
Oh my God!
But he was the co-founder of this company, and SAP now uses that product as part of their offering. You don't need $1 billion budget anymore. You need a good idea and access to the right tools. That's another quote from the CEO of Donut Labs. Donut Labs is a spin-off of Verge Motorcycles, and they have a partnership with Nordic Nano. The CEO of Nordic Nano didn't have much to say except that the technology does exist. Basically, all other questions were dodged by Nordic Nano PR, including an important question whether this technology is a supercapacitor or a battery.
Whoa, hey.
So let's start from the top. If we're going to be critically analyzing the claims that Donut made in this video, we should probably know what batteries are and what other energy storage solutions exist today, as well as what the difference is between them. So if you know all that already, feel free to skip this section. I'm not trying to undermine anyone's intelligence, but I think it's worth a review. This is a battery, a lithium iron phosphate battery in this case. It's got an anode, a cathode, and a separator. And the things that move around in it are lithium ions. And this stuff in between is the liquid electrolyte. During charging, the lithium ions detach from the lithium iron phosphate in the cathode and move through the electrolyte and then the separator into the anode. Note the electron movement as well. It's the same direction. The lithium ions settle across the carbon in the anode evenly. This is called diffusion. Remember that one for later. And at the end of the charging cycle, you've got lithiated graphite in the anode and iron phosphate in the cathode because the lithium ion is missing. Now let's look at discharging. And maybe I'm the only one, but I constantly get anode and cathode confused. So let's make it easy to remember. I tell myself that discharging is in alphabetical order, and that's a good thing. Meaning that lithium ions move alphabetically from the anode to the cathode, and the cathode is the positive electrode. While the lithium ions are moving from the anode to the cathode inside the battery, the electrons are following, but in the path of the circuit on the outside of the battery and providing power at the same time. The lithium ions are moving from the anode through the electrolyte and the separator into the cathode. And of course, the compounds change back to what they were, lithium iron phosphate and graphite. Since we're moving ions and electrons around and changing compounds, this is a chemical reaction. That's important to note for later as well. And that's a basic look at how rechargeable batteries work today. This liquid electrolyte-filled battery, with a separator and chemical changes taking place while charging and discharging, is called a Faradaic storage mechanism. Not to be confused with a farad, which is a unit of electrical capacitance. Joules is to energy as farad is to electrical capacitance. You'll come across that term, so knowing that will help. And while Michael Faraday sounds like the name of a famous pro tennis player, he wasn't. He was the guy who figured out electromagnetic stuff and magnetism stuff, along with other things. So for the scope of this video, a battery has Faradaic chemical change and is diffusion limited, which is that process of those ions intercalating or organizing where they're supposed to go. If you're following me so far, you're doing great. How about subscribe? Maybe hit the like button. And I can now introduce the spectrum. I'll leave this right here. This is all we know so far, but we'll cover all of it. And speaking of covering all of it, next we need to talk about a capacitor, which is on the other side of this energy spectrum. Capacitors hold energy, just like batteries do, but in a completely different way. Imagine a wall on the outside of your home. There's the heat and the cold, and depending on the time of year, one is on either side. In this case, assuming the brick and mortar is airtight, to keep the heat inside and the cold outside. The heat and the cold are the charges, and the dielectric is the wall of our home. And dielectric is appropriately named because that's where the current stops or where the electric dies. I'm not sure if it was named for that reason, but pretty good job, honestly. If this wall has a window and you were to open that window, it would basically be like deleting the wall. The hot air would move through the upper part of the window and the cold air would move through the bottom. To further elaborate, there are two states of charge in our capacitor, and they're held apart by a dielectric, which is an electrically insulated but polarizable material. Most commonly glass, ceramic, air, a polymer, an oxide layer even. And a polarizable material is an insulator with an internal charge distribution that can be distorted, shifted, or rearranged by an external electrical field. And unlike a battery, this electrical charge is stored physically, meaning no chemical reactions are taking place. So our dielectric, which is the wall in this example, holds our charge or our energy, and it's only released when it's time. If we look inside the dielectric, it has that polarizable substance. And now we can bring in Dennis the Menace, who's pulling back his slingshot. Negative electrons are pulled the opposite direction of where they want to go, and positive nuclei are pushed to the opposite position of where they naturally rest. And since Dennis is pulling our slingshot, we now have an electric charge ready to release. And when it is released, it's exactly the same way Dennis would release his slingshot. All at once. No chemical changes, no waiting, no plateaus, linear release, boom. Think static electric shock, a bolt of lightning.
What did you say? A bolt of lightning!
Etc. Just like the electricity is released instantly, charging is the same. Very fast, almost instantaneous. And since these cycles are purely physical, the cycle life of a capacitor is extremely high. So where's the drawback? Of course, it's watt-hours per kilogram. A capacitor can't store a lot of energy compared to its size and weight. So, both ends of the spectrum have now been identified, and obviously the uses for these two things will be drastically different. And boy, do I wish that was it. But for the scope of this video, we need to dive a little deeper. Because when the donut battery was first revealed, I thought we were talking about two specific types of energy storage: batteries and capacitors. And many of the videos I watched kind of hinted at maybe it's one or the other, or at least didn't specify much further. But this is far from the reality. Capacitors are kind of old school, and there's a newer, more powerful type of capacitor in use today. That's a supercapacitor, or an electric double layer capacitor, or EDLC for short. In this capacitor, we don't have a dielectric. We have what's called a Helmholtz layer. It looks like this, but it's very thin, molecular level thin. There's an electrolyte present as well in an EDLC. But because of the double layer configuration, it's essentially two capacitors and physically stored energy. No Faradaic charging, no redox reactions, no diffusion limitations. Nothing chemical at all going on, really. So we've uncovered our next part of the energy storage spectrum. You've got an electric, non-diffusion limited, physical, electrostatic capacitor. You have your Faradaic, diffusion limited, chemical changing, electrolyte filled battery, and now our EDLC, which is one step closer to the middle. So now we need to go to the battery side and jump one step closer to the middle. But before we do, let's review limitations and advantages of what we've covered so far. Batteries hold a lot of energy. They're energy dense, high watt-hours per kilogram, but they're limited in their power delivery and charging by the diffusion reactions, which are chemical. Also, because there's chemical reactions going on, the cycle life is much shorter and can be cut short because of extreme conditions or high or low states of charge. Capacitors, on the other hand, move energy fast, can cycle tens of thousands of times or more, but don't store energy very efficiently when it comes to weight and volume. So now we can talk about the next storage option on our spectrum on the battery side, which is the next generation lithium-ion battery, or LIB, hybrid supercapacitor. I say LIB because there's an LIC also. We'll get to that one. But this hybrid supercapacitor is an innovation as far as a few different qualities. LIBs, which is what I'll be calling them going forward, are very energy dense for what they can do. They're not globally diffusion limited, which means they don't have a plateau as far as energy delivery or charge acceptance. They're locally diffusion limited in specific regions, and we need to make more sense of that. You see, energy in an LIB is stored simultaneously in three places: an electric field, which is capacitive. That's our capacitor end of the spectrum. There's also a surface redox state, which is pseudocapacitive. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then finally, there are shallow lithium intercalation sites, which is how a battery works. And these LIBs are designed so that battery type storage is kind of the last on the list as far as usage and delivery. Your energy delivery is not linear. That's that lightning bolt.
What did you say? A bolt of lightning.
But it's also not plateaued. It's kind of a mix, hence the hybrid nature. Cycle life can be 10 times that of a battery, or more, many more, up to 100,000 cycles in some cases. We're not talking about as high watt hours per kilogram, but it's not a bad trade-off. And all this stuff in the middle is basically related to trade-offs. We'll talk more about the LIB in just a second, but let's introduce our next candidate on the spectrum, which is also on the battery side, and that's a lithium-ion capacitor. This one is also kind of a hybrid, but it's really just a half and half. You see, a lithium-ion capacitor stores energy partly in an electric field at a high surface area cathode, and partly as chemical potential from lithium ions. And the two mechanisms operate simultaneously. The cycle life on a lithium-ion capacitor is excellent, over 100,000. Charging can take place in just seconds, and the power density, that's the delivery of power, is very high. So now we've made it to the middle and to our most complex to understand energy storage solution, the pseudocapacitor. A pseudocapacitor stores energy chemically, but the chemical reactions occur only at or extremely near the surface. Electrons do not cross chemical bonds, but ions do diffuse deep into the bulk, like a battery. However, there's no phase change, and it's not diffusion limited. There are no long diffusion paths. The chemical reactions that take place are kinetically fast. You can think of it as chemical reactions that are shallow enough to behave like capacitance. There's a lot of different chemistry being used in a pseudocapacitor, but another major characteristic is very small, as in nanoparticle material size. In a pseudocapacitor, smaller material size improves power and apparent capacitance by turning slow bulk redox into fast surface redox. To a point. But if you get too small, stability and usable energy suffer. So, let's look at a chart that shows all the advantages and disadvantages of each type. And this may look like a lot, but we can assign a direction to most of these as they relate to increased benefits. The first two rows just identify what they are and how the energy is stored. Capacitors are purely electrostatic. There's a double layer in the EDLC. Pseudocapacitor has surface redox or chemical reactions. A lithium-ion capacitor is a hybrid. The hybrid LIB is a deep hybrid system, and obviously we've got a chemical battery all the way on the other end. How is the energy stored? We've got an electric field. We have ion separation at the surface. We have fast surface chemical reactions, a chemical anode and a capacitive cathode. We have composite electrodes with capacitive and battery materials, and then finally just bulk lithium intercalation. On to charge speed. Obviously, charge speed gets better as we move from a battery over to a capacitor. Energy density is going to go the opposite way. It's worse at the capacitor side and continues to get better as we get towards a battery. Power density. This is going to be an advantage for the capacitor side. Voltage versus state of charge. That's delivery curve. Linear means as instant as humanly possible, and flat plateau means there's a constraint that keeps it from going any higher. Cycle life. We've got an extremely high cycle life on the capacitor side and moving towards a less desirable result on the battery side. Physical storage is an advantage for capacitors. There is no chemical reaction in two of our examples, and then towards the middle it becomes more and more confusing with a total chemical reaction on the battery side. Capacitors are used for signal filtering and timing, and its power bursts for supercapacitors. The pseudocapacitor does have fast energy, and there's some power involved. Power smoothing along with some storage in the case of the lithium-ion capacitor, and the hybrid LIB capacitor. That's high power and meaningful energy. Obviously, long duration is the battery's expertise. C-rate, that's how fast can it charge and discharge. If I have a 100 kilowatt hour battery, you just take the hours off if the C-rate is 1. 5 C-rate would be 500 kilowatts. A 0.5 C-rate for my 100 kilowatt hour battery would be 50 kilowatts. That's kind of the range for our current battery technology. That hybrid LIB capacitor, think about a 50 C-rate. That is some slamming and speed. And it's probably as far as we'd ever need to go with electric vehicles. So there's your breakdown of current battery technology. That's stuff you can buy today. And now back to our regularly scheduled red flags. The skepticism also begins here with Nordic Nano. How does a company with 9 employees as of September beat the entire planet Earth to market? And of course, the company that has an idea that's worth infinite money, really, would choose a small manufacturer that does boutique motorcycles as their strategic partner.
Then there's Watt Electric Vehicles. They don't sell electric vehicles, but they will sell you a platform for you to build yours on. They were also featured beside Donut this year at CES. I did some digging and currently can't find any vehicles for sale that feature this platform.
Donut Labs claims their goal is to lower the barriers to building electric vehicles, not only for large manufacturers, but for smaller ones looking to enter the market. Keep that in mind for later. And this story is kind of a repeat of last year. The Donut Labs motor was CES last year, and this year it was a solid-state battery that is paired with the motor in a new motorcycle. And we actually do know one of their deployment concepts, and that's a micro factory. Basically a shipping container that has everything you need to manufacture on site wherever the motors they make need to go so you can build something. And maybe this micro factory carries over to the battery as well, because the deployment of this technology is also going to all be done by Donut Labs somehow. Supposedly it's going to be cheaper than lithium ion. The where is Finland. Right now. That's what we know. There's a Nordic Nano factory. Everything I've ever found on it has nothing in it, like this picture here, but it has been confirmed that the first manufacturing will take place in Finland. When? Well, it sounds like it's production ready, and production is starting now, but that doesn't mean anyone's going to get it into their hands tomorrow. Q3, Q4, 26 is probably when people will have completed the teardowns of this battery, if they deliver it. And then there's the how, the breakdown of like what the heck is going on. Well, it's printing. One way or another, this is probably printing. Is it screen printed? Is it extruded? Is it lasers? I don't know. But it's printed. There were paper batteries at CES. It's probably in that same realm, and this is where your proprietary stuff is going to happen, and it's probably going to look something like, some of this stuff. So, who, what, where, when, how? So that's chapter 1. Let's sum it all up. Here are your red flags. There's no proof, so I guess we have to trust the hat. There's no prototype. Nobody at CES had this battery. We've never seen the battery in person. No one's ever seen the battery. We have to trust the hat. Number 3, there's no technology validation. You don't need to bring a validated battery to CES if you have validation. So I guess in hat we trust. 3.5 is the hat itself, as illustrated. Number 4, in-house manufacturing. These guys sell things. They don't grow them. I think anyone involved in the tech space can tell you the difference between the types of people that sell things and the types of people that grow them are different types. And no offense to anybody, but I don't think they have the capital to grow things. Otherwise, they wouldn't have an empty factory. If you make a company called AppGyver and you figure it out enough to sell it to SAP and you made a bunch of money, why wouldn't you continue that strategy? Number 5, cheaper than lithium ion. How do you know? Lithium prices change every day. It's a commodity market. Are you literally just using air to make this battery? Are there no material costs at all? That claim is completely and totally unverifiable. And if this is a sodium battery, it's probably still going to cost more. Natron Energy, which is a sodium battery company, just went out of business. Bedrock Materials made sodium ion batteries, but they just quit. Why? Our modeling pointed to a clear outcome in a world where lithium remains abundant. Today's sodium ion batteries can't compete on cost, even at a commercial scale. So is Donut stealing the sodium? I hate to be facetious here, but you can't claim this. Number 6, empty factory, no employees. At CES, the CTO of Donut was talking about how they were selectively hiring only the biggest brains.
We're still keeping the team very small, so the same as we're doing with motors, it's just like 10 people doing all of it.
If the battery is ready for production, you don't need brains, you need bodies, because you've already built the line and verified the viability for scale and all the other things that come with ready for production. Why do you need more big brains? Doesn't make any sense. Number 7, no specifics on process. This is how you get the big money. The OEM partnership, etc. There are only 2 reasons not to talk about at least the general basics of your process. Number 1, it's a copycat, or number 2, it's not real. If this is real, what's going on? Well, carbon nanotubes. Misco Electric did a breakdown of what a theoretical battery like this would look like with all of Donut's claims. Some of those materials would include sodium, aluminum foil, the nanotubes, titanium dioxide, alumina, water, and some other stuff I can't pronounce. But if you already know exactly how your lithium battery in your EV is made up, you're way ahead of me. Basically, I'm trying to figure out if this is true, how does it occur, and what does the procedure look like to get it from where it is now to the battery wherever your batteries go. Your car, your home energy storage, the grid power that you're getting, etc. There was also some research done at the Korea Institute of Science and Technology, or KIST. Every KIST begins with nanotubes. Developing high-performance energy storage by integrating carbon nanotubes with conductive polymers like polyaniline into flexible, durable fibers for applications in EVs, drones, and wearables. Researchers bond carbon nanotubes with polyaniline to create nanoscale fibers that enhance both electron and ion transport, significantly boosting energy storage capacity and speed. This technique creates highly aligned CNT fibers, sometimes functionalized, leading to excellent conductivity and strength, even producing active material-free fibers with inherent pseudo-capacitance, and obviously we've already covered that, performance and applications. Ultra-high performance with excellent energy and power density and stability, 100,000 plus cycles. That is exactly what Donut is talking about. You've also got bio-oxidative solutions, and they sell 2D graphene oxide, minimum order 500 kilos. They've now lowered the price of graphene oxide from $200 a gram to $1 a gram. They've got a green advanced oxidation method where they can functionalize graphene sheets to make them water-loving. The reason graphene has not changed the world yet is because it is not functional or usable. We changed that. Our new process allows the graphene to be sprayed, printed, or filtered down on substrates to create membranes, printed circuits, and 3D structures. Both the dendrite shorting issue and non-uniform pressure differentials across the ceramic proton exchange membrane, which leads to cracking and failure of the ceramic membrane, will be solved by the mass manufacturing of functionalized graphene. And this does fall in line with current technology. Tesla has made a similar discovery, but on the cathode side. So that might be it too. And likely something to do with the University of Eastern Finland. We offer the manufacturing service for surface structures of micrometer and nanometer sizes in which we use electron beam lithography and various lithographic manufacturing processes in a clean room environment. The theory is some of that action probably happened at that University of Eastern Finland. So here's the breakdown. Potentially new solid-state technologies. You've got carbon nanotubes. There seems to be a high likelihood that if it's real, this is part of it. There's graphene stuff going on, there's printing stuff going on, and a whole bunch of nanoscale stuff. It's the same with microchips. We were at one level of technology and we couldn't make the size any smaller until we invented a massive new machine that could do better, and now we have more powerful, smaller microchips. So if it's real, it's probably some of this stuff, at least as far as we know. Everyone on Earth is going to want this battery if it's real. So where is it going to go? Honda doesn't want to build EVs. GM just wrote off a bunch of money and scaled back. Ford just wrote basically everything off and made a promise to do it later, but better. So who's going to get it? In a best case scenario, almost no one is going to drive an EV with this solid state battery, even if everything they claim is completely real. Because Donut is not selling batteries to you. They are selling batteries to OEMs, and OEMs don't really build much. Suppliers do. So a supplier is going to get this technology and put the battery in and then sell the battery to the OEM with the badge on your vehicle. And do you think they're going to pass those savings on to you? Suppliers and OEMs get the benefits of price parity, not us. Price parity for a retail customer in the automotive space is when the price of an EV is equal to that of a competitive internal combustion engine model, which should happen this year. It's easier to get sodium for you or me, but at scale, because lithium supply chains are mature and lithium is currently abundant, sodium just isn't cheaper right now. And if these batteries are real, demand will be sky high and they won't be cheaper either. We pay extra for features, we pay extra for more range, we pay extra for faster charging. How do you profit on a battery with 100,000 cycles? Also, charging in 5 minutes. Where's your nearest megawatt charger? I'll wait. If there's a miracle drug that cures cancer tomorrow and is completely abundant, totally cheap, and easy to make, what happens? Well, First, a patent is filed, and we'll talk more about that in a second. But once that patent exists, one dosage of this drug goes to, what, $100,000, maybe higher, per month, per dose, whatever the market will withstand. Supply can be artificially diluted, which makes demand artificially inflated. Martin Shkreli would be having a field day, to put it in the fewest words I can. And in turn, insurance companies would turn it down because, well, curing of cancer, that's an elective procedure. And so who gets it? The absolute richest, most powerful, and most famous people. And that's it. Do you know how much money everyone loses if there's no more cancer? We still need all the poor people to die from it, and suffer a long time throughout that process. And this is exactly how any market would treat this kind of technological advancement. China will not partner. They will not cooperate. They will Sun Tzu it out of them. AI companies will become the highest bidders to get to the front of the line because of desperation. Utility companies that are interested in it will legislate to stronghold it. Lobbyists will wine and dine to finesse it. Those are your ugly markets. Like the oil companies, they're still really interested in solid state. They just don't want you to know. And they also don't want you to know how they got it. Lobbyists is that answer. And meanwhile, the legacy US automobile OEMs will just be having dinner with those oil company people, laughing about how they don't want this technology at all. It takes too much away from their bottom line and intellectual property. Of course, they'll buy some of the crumbs for the next Celestique. Want to know the path to market for a new technology? Follow the money and use history as your guide. So with that in mind, let's walk through some of the scenarios that Donut might be building to make their money, because that's what this is really about. I like the fact that they have published that they want electric vehicles to be easier to access, but just like some of the claims, I don't necessarily believe them. Right now, in 2026, a clean energy revolution should be in fast forward, but it's not. The goal here is to make EVs better, safer, cheaper, and easier to own than gas cars. So let's look at some of that. What are the challenges for modern batteries? Weight. I will admit, batteries are heavy, but apples to apples, we're very close. Refueling time. Charging speed is obviously a handicap for EVs, but I made an entire video about how if you own an EV and you charge at home, you're spending less time refueling than if you owned a gas car already. Safety. You may be upset about this, but EVs are so much less likely to catch fire right now. Crumple zones are way more advantageous for the passengers because there's not a massive engine in the front that tries to force its way into the cabin and kill you in a head-on collision. Cost. The average cost of an EV is $55,000 to $57,000. The average cost of a new vehicle is $50,000. And we all know the fuel is cheaper, so that argument can't be made anymore either. Average cost of a used EV, $20,000 to $30,000. Average cost of a used gas car, $26,000. If you're a savvy shopper, you can beat a comparable gas car right now. So that argument's out the window. But even though EVs are extremely competitive right now, Europe just rolled back thanks to pressure from automotive manufacturers. The tax credit and the emissions regulations were canceled in the US. Can't imagine why.
You were I believe, the biggest spender of lobbying money in Washington after Meta.
That's because I spend time talking to the administration so they know our policies.
That's fair.
You know.
When she says talking to the administration, I think she means writing legislation. And nobody needs Donut Labs to get safe, affordable, unbelievably fast charging EVs. Geely owns Volvo, which produces cars in the US, and they make this car 10 to 80% in 7 minutes. That's right now. It's probably really expensive, but if a 7-minute time was the expectation, then a 35-minute time would no longer be acceptable at any price. But we can't get it. And yes, it's a safe battery. It's lithium iron phosphate in 7 minutes. That's the cleanest, safest mass manufactured technology there is right now. You can build a microfactory if you want.
More than 700 miles if you want.
But it doesn't really solve anything. You think 40 employees in Finland are going to build this?
We sustainably source spodumene and bring it to site, where we then run it through a series of conveyance systems, take it through a kiln and cooler. From there, we take it through an alkaline leach and additional purification steps.
All over the world. But back to LFP, which doesn't catch fire and doesn't use nickel or cobalt. How much does that cost again? $81 per kilowatt hour at the pack level. And what's that price parity point? Right around $100 per kilowatt hour? So that tells me we've already met price parity. And these batteries, again, have extremely low risk of fire, don't use nickel or cobalt, can charge 10 to 80% in 7 minutes. So why doesn't the Equinox EV and the Hummer or the EX30, or the Leaf, or the Lucid, and the Lyriq all have these batteries already. What are we doing?
What were they thinking?
Well, we sold ourselves out. And I think it's worth taking a look at LFP to help explain the future of this solid-state battery, because it's going to be a fight. GM didn't just lobby to abolish emissions regulations. They lobbied for the tariffs so the US could be isolated as far as technology. They just refused to write the last chapter for gasoline-powered vehicles in personal mobility. And I could literally go on forever about this. But the point is,
one does not simply
adopt a new technology overnight. For LFP, in 1996, it was John Goodenough, that's the battery goat, at the University of Texas at Austin. Not only is he one of the inventors of the lithium-ion battery, which allowed batteries in phones, tablets, and laptops to be rechargeable, he even published a paper about an all-solid-state battery back in 2017. So, University of Texas at Austin, then it was Hydro-Quebec, and the University of Montreal, and it's all patents for the late 90s. In the early 2000s, they made more technological breakthroughs. They figured out the conductivity and reduced particle sizes. And some of that research was done at MIT. And now we're into the early to mid 2000s. A123 Systems starts coming with more patents based on the findings at MIT. That's carbon coatings, doped particles, etc. But at this point now you've got a bunch of patents. We've got the Texas Montreal patents and the A123 Systems patents. And there's even patents from these two companies, neither one of which I can pronounce or will even try to. It's like that cable you bought on Amazon. I can't pronounce that. But now there's three groups of patent holders all blocking each other. And yes, it's blocking. So we're doing court battles. Hydro-Quebec versus A123 Systems. It's scope and infringement and all about who gets the money. And the money's important because no R&D without any money. Finally, in 2008, the European Patent Office revoked Goodenough's patent. So 12 years after discovery, there's a major patent revocation that allows more broader study and development. But remember, patents are important because no patent, no R&D money. Around the time that patent's being revoked in Europe, the Chinese realized what kind of a gold mine,
iron mine,
that LFP might be. And China being China, they got government money that's not contestable or has to go through Congress. It just gets used. And by 2008 Beijing Olympics, yeah, the buses you rode around in the 2008 Olympics had LFP. It was that fast. And like I said, government money, royalty-free patent use, breaking the rules for the sake of the future. Boy, I wish we did that here in the US. So while China's scaling aggressively, we've got A123 Systems in the US. And as far as notable pluses, the Chevy Spark EV, that was A123 Systems LFP. Does A123 Systems sound familiar? Yeah, that was the battery supplier for Fisker. Not Fisker Inc., Fisker Automotive. And we all know how that story ended, but A123 Systems is an important little microcosm in our LFP history that we should zoom in on. 2009, $249 million grant from the US DOE. And immediately after, if not the exact same time, $380 million from the stock market when they went public, and over $1 billion in total funding raised. Funding from the US government, which is our tax dollars, and the stock market, which is our pre-tax dollars. Here's another important point. While A123 Systems was still alive, they made a partnership with SAIC. That's a Chinese company. GM partners with them today, but SAIC was going to build the batteries in China. That's important for later, because in 2018, 19, and 20, all those structural patents from the original filings finally expired. 20 years is the timeline. That's important for later too. And of course, China already has the technology thanks to A123 Systems and that partnership to build those batteries. And of course, A123 Systems went bankrupt because of Fisker. But the patents have now expired, right? Nothing to worry about. Well, China needs to make sure they have patents now. So they went super aggressive on patent filing, and they kind of doubled down on LFP like any reasonable company would do, seeing the future being the future. By 2021, 40% of all Chinese EVs used LFP. And all the LFP batteries you get here in the States are from China as well. The LFP Model 3, the Mach-E Select, the R1 series lower trims, and of course the upcoming 2027 Bolt. It's all LFP technology from China. So what about US LFP? Well, 2027, you've got Ford doing that EV platform that has the truck with the 2-foot bed, and GM is supposed to switch some of Spring Hill where they build the Ultiums comes to LFP as well in 2027. And I know that was a long walk, but it's important to see that LFP was a breakthrough technology in 1996, and we're not going to get it in our cars here in the US until 2027. That's 30 years. And we established some important points along the way as well. Patents are important for research and development, as well as to raise funding and keep a company afloat. Any technology that has a competitive patent history is going to face tough litigation in order for those patents to be honored. And we don't get global adoption of a technology until the patents expire, which is 20 years. And we've done a lot of talking about a lot of other types of energy storage and batteries, but now I think we've got enough foundation to dive into the solid state realm. Let's take a very quick break right in the middle here. This video is sponsored by you. I criticize large companies. I share my complete and total opinion. I don't hide behind companies or what I should or shouldn't say. And that's because of my Patreon and YouTube member supporters. I couldn't have stopped producing videos for over a month and only making what was absolutely necessary when it came to my realm without the power and support of my patrons and YouTube members. Maybe I got you out of a jam. Maybe I helped you find an answer you couldn't find anywhere else. Maybe you just appreciate my angle on certain topics and my willingness to approach those topics. Regardless of why, I could not be right where I am now without you. I will never have access to a press fleet, or insider releases, or party favors, or go bags, or free products showing up at my door. But because of that, I am free to say what I want. If that interests you or you appreciate that, just hit the like and watch this one till the end. That's enough. If you want to go further, Patreon and YouTube membership is the way to do that. You get early access to every video. Now back to what I was saying.
Remember our energy spectrum? Well, solid-state batteries are still batteries, hence the name, which also means they don't meaningfully move near the center of the spectrum. Solid-state batteries are still diffusion limited. In fact, often more constrained in effective diffusion than batteries with a liquid electrolyte, because now there's no liquid for the ions to travel through. It's like comparing airtight to watertight. Watertight is easier. And I've got a bunch more metaphors to slap you upside the screen with, because I've got a massive list of solid-state breakthroughs, but before I break them to you, we need to know why all this is being done. I'll start with the fundamental goals of solid-state batteries. Since we are a money-first capitalist society, goal number one is shareholder wealth, and that's obtained through intellectual property, research funding, and of course the publicity of a potentially large breakthrough. And yes, I'm not lost on the fact that patents are more important than product on this list, and of course there's more on that later. Number two would be the fundamental science goal. More power baby, watt-hours per liter, and watt-hours per kilogram. More zoom, less weight and size. Next, shareholders want fewer warranty claims, and less fire, of course. Solid-state batteries do not pose anywhere near the risk of thermal runaway. Big benefit there. And finally, local production, less dependence on China, new processes, which is another great fun way to grab some fresh intellectual property, and a great way to grab government incentives, in the event those were to ever exist again. But it is still a battery, and they don't call the solid-state battery the holy grail for nothing. Remember our lithium iron phosphate battery? That's a liquid electrolyte, and so, from a high level, lithium ions literally swim from one phase to the other. In a solid-state battery, there's a solid electrolyte. But ions still have to diffuse. And yes, that's a challenge. If you're visualizing this, it's like pulling a quarter through a McDonald's Play Place ball pit using only a magnet, except the balls are constantly shifting, compressing, and separating as you pull. So instead of swimming, or more accurately pulling the ions through water using a current, the diffusion process becomes much more like parkour. And sometimes with parkour, there's no place to jump. If the balls aren't touching or close enough together, then there's no force from the magnet. That means your parkour jumper is stopping and the ions pathway is broken. And while a solid-state battery may validate in the lab, measured with bulk conductivity, that does not translate to real life. Real life is parkour in an architecturally diverse neighborhood. Bulk conductivity is, can ions move through this material if nothing goes wrong? The real world stuff, or effective conductivity, answers the real question. Can ions move through this once everything goes wrong at the same time? A solid electrolyte introduces a ton of new problems in the real world, which is that effective
conductivity. They include grain boundaries, particle-to-particle interfaces, electrode-to-electrolyte interfaces, voids and microcracks, tortuous pathways, contact loss during cycling, chemical interfaces, and mechanical stress. And one of the only methods we know to use to solve most of these problems is high pressure. More on that in a second. So what you often end up with is, and this may sound counterintuitive, but solid-state batteries have electrochemically driven mechanical fatigue, chemistry causing mechanics to fail, which then feeds back into chemistry. So, we've identified two of the biggest challenges with solid-state batteries, and they're probably the toughest to conceptually understand: physical contact and ionic conductivity. But there's more. Parkour is absolutely breathtaking when it's expertly executed, but plotting a course where that execution is achievable is very hard. One might even be motivated to cheat. Here's a super misleading headline as an example. Factorial launches solid-state battery program in the US. Oh, sick! Solid-state batteries right here in the US. Well, not quite. Scroll down a little bit and you find these Factorial energy batteries are quasi-solid state, which is as close to solid state as you can get without being solid state, closer than semi-solid, for example. But they are not what the headline says they are. Let's go back to building our parkour city. If you build structures that are very similar to current ones and are manufactured in similar ways, then the building gets easier. And cheaper, of course. That's a quasi-solid state battery. Instead of a solid electrolyte or a liquid, it's a gel, which is obviously not a liquid, but also definitely not a solid either. Since it's a gel, there's still thermal runaway potential, so why even build them? Because your current manufacturing process doesn't have to change hardly any. You've got a better battery coming off the line, and you're definitely saving cost and avoiding complexity. Current battery factories are built around slurry casting, liquid infiltration, calendaring, roll-to-roll processing, and moderate pressures. Fully solid-state batteries break almost all of this manufacturing line, which is why the production vehicles for Karma Automotive are getting quasi-solid-state batteries, and the controlled tests, like those in this vehicle, are getting the all-solid-state batteries. Because the solid-state units just aren't ready for mass production. But the quasi-solid-state batteries experience many fewer limitations compared to the ones I listed earlier for the solid-state units. Here's a low-res chart to boost your understanding. So, to recap, the unsolved drawbacks of solid-state batteries so far are physical contact, ionic conductivity in the real world, and novel manufacturing processes. There's a ton to cover in manufacturing, but because it's all secretive and proprietary, we can say this. Because pressure is often involved and solids are less forgiving, the manufacturing process for solid-state batteries is not only less forgiving, but defects are more likely to occur. This reduces yield and raises cost. And if that didn't raise costs enough, the solid materials themselves are often very sensitive to their environment, contamination, and small defects, making processing that much more expensive. But wait, there's more. Since lithium ions have mass, not to be confused with inertia, when a solid-state battery charges and discharges, it physically changes size. This can lead to cracking, delamination, and other fundamental problems. Then there's interfacial chemical instability. You see, when a liquid electrolyte-based battery charges for the first time, an SEI forms, or a solid electrolyte interphase, and part of the battery capacity is lost right there. SEI formation is largely a one-time front-loaded process, and this layer is necessary for the battery to work. But with a solid-state battery, layers of this type can form over time as solid electrolytes can react with the electrodes themselves. These layers can reduce conductivity, grow brittle, and create fragility within the battery, as well as reduce the life of the battery over time. And the layers often continue growing during additional cycling. And since there's no liquid electrolyte, the mechanical properties of each solid become critically important. Differences in stiffness, fracture behavior, and thermal expansion mean that interfaces between materials become hot zones for failure and degradation. And these interfaces can provide pathways for dendrite growth along defects or cracks. This is why fast charging claims are fragile and real-world tests are often conservative. Remember the donut battery being dialed back to half speed for fast charging so you can get a coffee? Maybe that's not the whole reason. Also, thermal management is still an issue and not really solved. You've got cracks cracking and conductivity issues, making fast charging fragile and not just a cooling problem. So now we can put all the challenges in one place. Physical contact, ionic conductivity, manufacturing, chemomechanical volume change, interfacial chemistry instability, mechanical mismatches at interfaces, and thermal sensitivity. If you want to look at it from a high level, there are a lot of similarities between nuclear fusion, hydrogen fuel cell adoption, and solid-state batteries when it comes to the real world. Solid-state batteries live at the intersection of real physics with real-world applications and Silicon Valley investor speak with overpromise and under-deliver timelines. And with that, we can probably look at the innovations in the solid-state space.
Low res chart.
So with that said, let's explore what solid-state technology and the patent barriers that may exist really looks like. Here's a look at solid-state technology as we know it today. First of all, we need to look at the companies. There are a ton of companies currently working on solid-state batteries. And yes, these are up to date, including the Geely announcement. And solid state at the end of the day doesn't really mean anything unless we know what kind of solid-state batteries there are. There are some common categories being developed, but because companies are secretive and racing to be first or best at this new technology, there are many different levels as to how vague the descriptions of the materials for the anodes, cathodes, and electrolytes are. Hydro-Quebec, for example, says their solid-state battery will have a solid polymer electrolyte. That description is extremely vague, but fairly common. Ion Storage, however, is developing a ceramic solid electrolyte, which is a claim not everybody on this list is making. Most of these materials are proprietary, and we won't know exactly what's going on, but we know that solid-state batteries are a way to get more energy density, and we can look at those next. 400 watt-hours per kilogram is the claim from Donut, and it looks like a lot of these solid-state batteries are in that same realm. Some a little more, some a little less, and of course we have some vague ranges. We also want to know when these batteries are going to hit the streets, and for Donut to say that in 2026 they're production ready, they're not the only ones. These are all published in different contexts, and some for different uses, but these are the most accurate estimates at the time of me publishing this video as far as when these are coming to market. And each one of these companies also has highlights as far as advantages that their solid-state batteries help provide. From an operational pilot line to cell-to-pack technology, cold pressed into shape, module-free packaging, 3D solid-state film, compact size, and even passing a 200°C nail test. There's so much technology diversity here, it would take a video the length of this video to really break it all down. But here's where Donut's strategy might be problematic. There are so many patents here that result from this technology. And if you look at the numbers and the trade-offs, it's almost like Donut took the best statistic out of each one of these categories that was the easiest to prove and promised that. What I can promise is that a technology that isn't 100% novel will face a very difficult route to a patent. And if they can't get the patent, they'll be licensing the technology for 20 years, which would again make that claim that they're cheaper than lithium impossible to back up in real life.
Solid-state batteries face 7 major categories of challenges, and most solid-state battery solutions are mechanical mitigations, not electrochemical breakthroughs. But that chart is pretty dense and might be hard to look at, so we can simplify it a little bit. Physical contact loss, real-world ionic conductivity, manufacturing, chemomechanical volume change, interfacial chemical instability, mechanical mismatch, and thermal issues. So how do you solve each of those? The physical contact problem. Examples include grain boundaries, electrode to electrolyte contact, and voids and microcracks. Is typically mitigated with pressure. That's the best mitigation so far, albeit an incomplete one. Donut has claimed there's no high pressure in their battery. For ionic conductivity, sulfides can exhibit high bulk conductivity, but effective conductivity remains a major problem in real systems. Regardless, that's the best mitigation so far, but Donut claims 400 watt-hours per kilogram and 5-minute charging. The best way to solve manufacturing is to not go all solid state. Quasi-solid state is the best real-world answer so far. With all solid-state batteries, the yield problems cause costs that aren't competitive. Right now, manufacturing compatibility beats theoretical elegance. However, Donut's manufactured units are supposedly cheaper than lithium-ion, and they also claim to be all solid-state. Chemomechanical change is reduced with pressure, as well as small particle size. This drawback is a real-world failure constraint. Cracking and other damage is difficult to avoid in rigid solids. Big shocker there. Despite this, Donut claims 100,000 cycles. For interfacial chemical instability, where different solids don't get along at contact points, currently the best mitigation is protective coatings. An example being lithium niobate, I hope I said that right, or LiNBO3, I hope I said that right. But Donut claims no lithium, and again, a 5-minute charge time. Mechanical mismatches are one of the causes of dendrites. Mismatches create defects and failure hotspots over time. Add enough current, and even so-called dendrite-blocking ceramics fail. A common mitigation here is, again, pressure. Donut claims 100,000 cycles and no dendrite growth. Finally, thermal issues don't go away with solid electrolytes. Instead of potential for fire, which you get with liquid electrolytes, you get potential for durability failure. Thermal mitigation in solid-state batteries is primarily an architectural problem. Materials and structures must create controlled heat flow paths and suppress damaging temperature gradients. Donut says 99% capacity at 100 C, and the battery can be any shape, so heat flow problems could have potentially been solved in a novel way. Donut's claims are being thrown around as if they are the holy grail, and there's a reason for that. Let's look at what some real-world companies are doing with their solid-state technology. I took 7 companies off my master list and zoomed in a little further as to how each of these challenges is being addressed. These are some of the major players, but not all of them. However, I do think it's a nice window into just how far from the competitive market Donut's claims go. Factorial Energy, for example, is going with those quasi-solid-state batteries we've already talked about, where the gel electrolyte will improve contact and conductivity, but more importantly, their quasi-solid-state battery is largely drop-in compatible. And even though gel electrolytes don't eliminate thermal runaway risk, they can improve safety and performance. QuantumScape is heavily investing in ceramic separator manufacturing for dendrite suppression and to raise the practical current limit and resist shorting pathways. Ceramic is also non-flammable and anode-free architecture that forms lithium metal during charging, can address energy density, dendrites, and architectural change. Solid Power is using a soft solid electrolyte for ionic conductivity. Soft sulfides also have better contact than oxides. There's a heavy reliance on interface coatings for interface control, and they've got OEM-partnered pilot-scale manufacturing and validation efforts. Toyota is also working with soft sulfides for adhesion and high conductivity sulfides for transport. There's already experience here with cathode coatings for interface mitigation, and Idemitsu, I hope I pronounced that right, is building a pilot facility for electrolyte production in partnership with Toyota as we speak. Honda has a pilot manufacturing line, and their focus is manufacturing feasibility and durability under cycling. It's more of a can we build it, not can we invent it. Samsung SDI is developing a pilot line focused on solid electrolytes and interface engineering, including coatings. Prologium is working on ceramic architecture aimed at reducing reliance on heavy pressure, exhibiting a non-flammable stack, and mitigating swelling and contact challenges through structure and materials. This is what the solid-state industry actually looks like right now. And there's actually a number for this. It's called a technology readiness level, where the batteries that we use today are a 9, a final commercial product. Solid-state batteries are currently a 4 to 6, prototype, modeling, validation, and field demonstration. And Donut Labs is currently a 2, no matter how many Louis Vuitton logos are on the hat. For reference, Aptera is about as far along as solid-state batteries, 6 or 7 in the readiness level. Yet Donut claims production ready today. The fact remains, there are several readiness levels between what Donut claims and what Donut can prove.
What is true about batteries is that EV battery technology is an advanced technology. And with that said, EVs and batteries are not a technology problem. They're a market problem. And maybe that's by design. You are completely fine filling your garage with flammable liquids of 8 to 10 different varieties and pumping them into everything mechanical around you. You're completely fine with the fact that they have to be burned at some seriously high temperatures, and you're cool with the burning and the byproducts being ejected into your face and your neighborhood and your yard. When I mow the lawn, I smell grass, which coincidentally is a distress signal. When you mow the lawn, I get a combination of unburned fuel vapors, exhaust, and then a distant third being the grass. And you're cool with that. Meanwhile, the company that builds the machine is totally cool with that because 80 to 90% of their value is the patents and that delivery system of that flammable liquid into the exhaust in your yard and your neighborhood and your face. And without those patents and the blocking ability, yes, blocking ability, and the scale that that blocking ability allows, those companies really aren't very valuable. And then there's the companies that survey and identify and dig and drill and extract and process and move all the oil around that goes into your machines that spit the exhaust in your yard and your neighborhood and your face. And of course, they have to put that in tanks literally everywhere. Tanks that cost millions and millions of dollars to put into the ground. Way more than an EV charging station would cost, which basically requires a parking lot and access to power, and that's kind of it. But don't worry about the cost of the pump for the oil company. They have another way to pay for it. It's called raising your taxes. Because the company that puts the tanks in the ground and keeps the oil in there isn't paying anywhere near the amount of tax that another company of the same size might pay. And it's an order of magnitude less than you pay. In fact, it might be zero. And because of that, you might be mad at the oil company. You might worship them too. I'm not here to tell you how to feel. But regardless, they're the bad guy. That way, there can be a good guy. You can fault them for the issues, the oil spills, the pollution, the COPD, the geopolitical unrest, the healthcare costs, the wealth inequality. And you can focus your good vibes on the good guy. That's the car company, who can get you another exhaust pumper for just 4.9% APR for 72 months. Because they know you have bias and nostalgia. And if you don't have nostalgia, they'll just insert the bias right there for you at the dealership through the mouth of the salesman. And if that's not enough, you've got advertising, lobbying, more advertising, and by the time your brain tries to process it all, the one thing you won't do is a cost analysis between a gas car and an EV. What's that quote about nostalgia? Normally, I consider nostalgia to be a toxic impulse. The yearning delusion that A, the past was better, it wasn't, or B, it can be recaptured, it can't. And that leads to bad art, movie versions of TV shows, and sad dads watching Fox News. Those aren't my words. But that was a long walk. What does any of this have to do with solid-state batteries? Instead of directly answering that question, let's sum up our third chapter, shall we? There's hesitance to build EVs from legacy OEMs. In the event the batteries are used, they'll be used for super high profit applications first, and the companies that can benefit the most from these solid-state batteries will fight in every way to acquire the technology at the lowest cost possible. Pressure from fossil fuel companies and automakers will stifle adoption, and timing is not going to be instant. The last mass-market battery breakthrough, lithium iron phosphate, a safe battery technology with current price parity at manufacturing scale and abundant raw materials already exists, was paid for mostly by the US government and US investors, and still took 30 years to get to scaled production in US vehicles. Donut Labs doesn't have the manpower or money to manufacture at scale on their own, which they claim is their goal, making 30-year mass market adoption likely a long shot. The fossil fuel industry is currently heavily subsidized, making battery technology extremely difficult to scale for the mass market due to cost inequality. And because the oil companies have such high profits because of such heavy subsidies, the oil industry can advertise, lobby, and influence public opinion, allowing for the oil industry to continue to sell oil in the highest amounts possible with the highest demand possible and in turn at the highest price possible. And finally, battery technology has only penetrated the US market between 8 and 11% of new vehicles, which is the bonus chapter. And now we've made it to the biggest problem with this technology. If in fact everything they say is true, and it's not a capacitor, it's actually a battery, and they know how to manufacture it in a small place, and they don't have to use any geologically challenging or geopolitically challenging materials. Well, now you got to deal with public sentiment. My most recent car review was the 2026 Solterra. I'd rather have the Model Y. It's lacking a ton of features. Where's the one-pedal driving? You know what doesn't have one-pedal driving? Every single gas car. And at the end of the day, you have to convince your uncle, who currently drives a gas car and has never driven anything except Subaru his entire life, to look at the Solterra. Because really, that's as far as we can hope that he'll look. He doesn't have a YouTube, he doesn't watch it, he only watches the news and maybe listens to the radio or watches a few television shows. And when he looks at his 8-9-year-old Outback, he thinks that, man, I'd really like to know what the new one's got. And that's as far as this person who has no interest in cars and doesn't follow car culture or car YouTube is going to think. That's the furthest they're going to go. So we need to convince that guy who only drives Subaru because of brand loyalty. You can tell me to get a Tesla because they're better. I know. I have a Tesla. It's my third one. They're really great cars. But as soon as I finish that sentence, someone is going to comment that there's other problems with owning a Tesla.
You're on the obscene list.
all over it. Like,
Oh my God!
When this proverbial uncle goes to the dealership, there are two vehicles he's considering, the Forester and the Outback. All we need to do is convince him to walk to the other side of the lot and consider that Solterra. And it doesn't have to compare to a Model Y or a Rivian R2 or a Honda Prologue or Google Navigation. It just has to compare to that Outback and that Forester. And when we do that, it starts to make things a little different. The cost is basically the same. And now, because of who we're talking about, we need to have that old school, I've never met you before, total strangers at the water cooler conversation. Fuel economy, cost, horsepower, and out-of-pocket money is what people talk about.
We have a great section of do-it-yourself.
Do you like to do it yourself?
We need your uncle to say, you know what? I'd rather have 120 miles per gallon equivalent. Wow, that $700 worth of annual fuel cost looks better than that $1,300. Oh my, the horsepower on this thing is way better. On the cheapest, lowest trim. Those are the conversations. The problem there is the salesperson knows that the incentives are high on the Solterra, but they get a better bonus if they sell the Outback or the Forester. And they know exactly how to sell a Forester. They just sold one 25 minutes ago. So the salesman is going to get in the way of the decision making here. What's your job? Butts in seats. Find an EV that he can sit in and ride around in and find out how quiet it is, how much more power it has, how much money you spend per year or lack thereof on fuel, how much less inconvenience you have. The only way that technologies like this matter is if you can convince one person that believes your opinion and that you regularly have this water cooler conversation with to get that EV. And there are still skeptics, but the sentiment you're really up against is this. All I need for me to get an EV is for it to be free to charge in 3 minutes, go 975 miles on a charge, and cost $12. I'm totally fine paying $2,000 a year more for whatever I drive right now, not even counting purchase price, because I'm scared. If that water cooler conversation has 4 people and you're one EV owner of 4, you need to convert that second one. We have to stop worrying about every single solitary feature. I won't buy it unless it's got cooled seats. I have to have a sunroof. It needs 500 miles of range. Because at the end of the day, the car in their driveway right now doesn't have it. You get quieter car, less maintenance, cheaper to own, never have to go to gas station again. I've had arguments with people about the weight of EVs. They drive an F-250 diesel, and they're telling me that my EV is too heavy for American roads. That opinion and point of understanding needs to be challenged by people like us. You need to know that the difference in weight between an EV and a comparable gas car is not really enough to matter. People need to know that there are $20,000 EVs of literally every variety and brand and range and type available right now.
CarGurus.com, all makes, all models, put in your zip, filters, 200 miles, do something reasonable so you don't get junk, and do something affordable so you don't get hosed. And then do reasonable mileage too. Click electric, go to vehicle history, hide the bad stuff, and check your results. Sort by lowest price, go past the sponsored ones, and then scroll past all the old compliance cars. No fast charging, no range, CHAdeMO, etc. Here we go. 2018, 250 miles of range, $9,600. Loaded minus all-wheel drive, reasonable amount of miles, under 20 grand. 18K, pretty color, all-wheel drive, and it's a CPO car. Might even come with a warranty. This Bolt is completely loaded. It's a pretty color red, it has 14,000 miles on it, and it's $13,000. $23,000, 16,000 miles, 2LT, all-wheel drive, another pretty color. 300 miles of range, 11,000 miles, all-wheel drive, $17,990. That's $341 a month, right on the page, with 8% interest and 0 down. $24,000, 12,000 miles, all-wheel drive. $20,000, 39,000 miles, all-wheel drive. 18,000 miles, all-wheel drive. $22,000, all-wheel drive, super fast charging. $17,000, again, $334 a month, nothing down, 72 months. Imagine you make a down payment.
With no credit and a horrible interest rate, you can get into one of these for $400 a month. If every one of those people bought an EV, they could probably afford a new one next time with the savings from the gasoline and the fact that they don't have to buy any. But they do have to charge, and I'd love to dive super deep into charging and how to fix it, but I already have. This video explains everything we need to do in order to make charging easily accessible everywhere, including right to charge, which is a fascinating topic that I break down at the end of it. The reason that this technology would be presented in this way, and at the end of the day, the technology is not a surprise. It's the way it's been presented. And the way this battery has been presented is not to say we're going to save the world, or even that we're going to change the world. It's that we showed up with the product, and now I'm rich. There are tons of ways to get a bunch of money out of this, whether they get a solid state battery on the market or not. Let's say you take a breakthrough from a university and compile it together with a bunch of other public knowledge based on patents, and you've got something new. You could try to sell or license that. Or you could just sell the entire Donut Labs to somebody who's really desperate to get into the market or get an idea or get ahead. Let's call that strategy the Letamaki, because he's already done that with AppGyver. Who else has done that? An OEM purchasing Donut would be extremely common practice in today's market and makes the future really hard to predict when it comes to technologies. For example, let's look at this video right here.
Geely, who are a massive Chinese company, they own the likes of Volvo. They have just signed an agreement with Maxwell Technologies, who make supercapacitors, that they are going to produce at least 5 of their electrified vehicles using Maxwell Technologies supercapacitors.
That didn't happen because this company was acquired. Who knows what happened? What we do know is Tesla bought Maxwell in 2019, took whatever technology they needed, then sold the ultracapacitor business to a former Maxwell executive, who then sold the supercapacitor business to an energy storage company. Tesla might have made an advance with that technology. They might have just made some money. We'll never know. The next way to do it is the Zach Horowitz. I'm not a scammer, so I don't know exactly how the Zach Horowitz would go, but basically collect a bunch of money from a bunch of smaller companies and run with the money before they figure it all out. It's like a cross between a Ponzi scheme and a con job. And no, it is not my opinion that they're trying to do this, but it is one way to get rich from this idea. Then there's the EV startup blueprint. We can go back to the big EV boom while everyone was stuck inside and had nothing to do but play with their stock portfolio during the pandemic. A lot of money went into a lot of EV companies at that time. You see, you release the battery at CES and then tell everyone the motorcycle is coming soon. Then a bunch of pre-orders come through for the motorcycle. Then you can borrow a bunch of money from, let's say, a private credit firm or a private equity firm based on the number of orders, and their base case is bankruptcy. We went through that whole thing with Fisker. But basically, you've got a whole bunch of cash from a big lending something, and you're going to try to grab all that cash and either figure it out or pretend to figure it out until it's too late for everyone to know you weren't actually trying to figure it out. And of course, you could buy a new hat. You see, in this case, Donut is protected from having to divulge all the battery anything. The pre-orders are real. The bikes are real. The bike's statistics are real. It's an air-cooled bike anyway. There's no thermals needed. Now, is that because it's a bike or because the battery's that good? This can all be hidden because Verge is the one getting the money, not Donut Labs. The spin-offs of spin-offs are sometimes made for tax purposes, but they can also be used for crime. Once you've got the bag from the private credit or the private equity or the loan shark down the street for that matter, you have enough money to run or to hide or to go out in public and try to spend it all on booze and parties before everyone figures you out. Once people get that kind of money, the map is always the same. It's just the paths to get there are different. The next reason they would present this battery this way is the old-fashioned rug pull. Maybe you get just enough validation, or maybe you cheat on the validation or lie. Whatever you've done, it's enough to warrant a SPAC merger. You get on, you get in, and you get out. And this is another one where you just have to run. Maybe your batteries make it into some bikes. Maybe another company builds a few boutique vehicles with your battery. Either way, you got a big check, you got really famous, and I mean, whatever, you're really rich now. The next strategy is the micro factory markup. Want access to the batteries? Well, you're gonna have to buy our motors and our OS and have us drop one of these storage containers off on site as a micro factory right beside yours. It's kind of like licensing the machine that builds the machine, because anyone can build a battery. The machine that builds the machine is way more important. That's how you scale up with no employees. You just have a small team that manufactures these micro factories one at a time and sends them to the part of the world where the partner they have chosen wants one. That's a super slow deployment. If you want the battery, you have to get the OS and the motors. If that's the case, then boutiques are going to be the only people interested in these. If it's not a scam, and there's a non-zero chance that it's not a scam, in that case, everything that you come up with must be novel for it to be cheap for anyone. Otherwise, you are going to be fighting in court with that whole list of companies I showed you earlier and all their patents. You're going to be licensing and bargaining and dealing. And in all reality, maybe there is a discovery in here, but I don't think they've solved all the things. As promised, I have 2 claims of what this might be if it is real. And when I say real, I mean some of the things that they claim on a real-world level are being output here. If it actually holds up to the 400 watt-hours per kilogram, the charge in 5 minutes, and the cheaper than lithium ion, which are kind of the end user benefits, we're looking at that hybrid LIB supercapacitor. Cycle life and charging speed work with this, but it's technically not a battery. There's also still risk of fire. The real-world examples of this technology contain lithium, so it's not green, which would mean the major breakthrough would be watt-hours per kilogram only, because this supercapacitor is about an order of magnitude short. In the event that they actually are getting the materials right, where they're super abundant and 100% green, then there's some kind of breakthrough with sodium and carbon nanotubes. And they found a way to print all this onto electrodes as one solid substance. That seems to be where we're heading with a lot of the research, and they could have figured out a breakthrough. But at that point, you have tons of potentials for mechanical failure that just haven't been solved by anyone on Earth in the real world. But with current technology, we can't have green and performance like they're claiming, at least not with the current periodic table and existing research and data. And then finally, as a bonus claim, if they actually solved it and it's all true, they lied about what it is. Because I believe it's possible with today's technology to find a way to create a sodium ion NAB hybrid supercapacitor. But even with this kitchen sink approach where there's a multiple component system of high density batteries and high delivery supercapacitors, the claim that it can be any shape goes out the window. Okay, so what have we learned? There's a couple brothers who run a couple companies. Some of their past actions are really legit. Some seem a little weird. They've definitely got some investment cash, and they say they've built a battery, not a capacitor. And those are 2 different things. In fact, an entire spectrum of different things. There are employees and relationships and things in the background that look legit. There's also an empty factory, not very many employees, and absolutely no proof. There are a lot of discoveries every single day concerning batteries and solid-state batteries. But if you took every single one of them and merged them together at manufacturing readiness, they don't add up to this battery yet. There's also a ton of speculative money to be made here. It's the holy grail of energy, and just by making small incremental steps, you can continue to catch investment money from large companies and governments, etc., kind of forever until somebody comes up with a real one. The energy economy is one of the most important fundamentals for human life, and that puts countries, governments, companies, and individual people in positions of immense power. And not all of them want solid state to come to fruition. There's a lot of money to potentially be lost, and there's a lot of wealth that could potentially be transferred or disrupted. Because of that, there are narratives that have been built over time that are extremely strong in the hearts, minds, traditions, and opinions of everyone. For these batteries to become a global phenomenon, public sentiment, public charging access, and patents that already exist are absolutely abominable barriers to entry. And if there is a discovery of this magnitude, or if it is this discovery, it may be 30 years before the smoke clears and the fight to control what it is and who gets it and who profits from it ends. Without a novel product and a patent, you're looking at a 10-year plus battle. And without that patent, there is absolutely no way to assign any value to any of these claims. And without value, there's no scale, because you can't get scale without investment, and you can't get investment without value. A lot of critics of EVs say solid-state batteries are the thing that might convince them to convert. But we all know when the $20,000 Chinese EV shows up that does the same thing as the $30,000 gas car made by an American company, there's no one who isn't going to try to jump ship. The whole point of this video is to communicate to you that Donut's discovery has to be completely novel, and they have an unbelievable fight ahead of them if it's not. And if it is completely novel, the first thing you would do is find enough money to run and get a patent. Instead, they chose to unveil it with no proof. Further scrutiny can be applied when you realize that Verge Motorcycles, a completely unknown boutique motorcycle company,
and Watt Electric Vehicles, launched in 2024 but yet to feature anything on an available vehicle for sale,
have exclusive access to this technology. The discovery itself is not a surprise. Breakthroughs are made all the time, but the way it was delivered is not the way it would be delivered in the event that this discovery is as novel as it needs to be. And I would love for this discovery to be real. I would love for a small company in Finland to become a leader in battery technology and supply all over the world, but I am skeptical about the way it is being deployed. I hope you can walk away from this video with enough knowledge to know that not only are electric vehicles perfectly good enough right now, but to also realize that solid-state batteries are not just one box that we need to put a check mark in. There is no perceived perfection and instant breakthrough here. With the chemistry and the physics that we know right now, there are mechanical problems with solid-state batteries. And until those can be solved, the physics and the science are maybe taking a back seat to it. In order to accelerate the adoption of a technology like solid-state batteries, we need international investment, we need cooperation, and we need to recognize that fossil fuels need to disappear as quickly as possible when it comes to burning them to move ourselves around. None of this is taking place today. We need to make clean energy is the future a global policy before something like this can be considered as major of a breakthrough as it is being sold as. Tesla, the staple for clean energy on Earth, as far as size and market cap, is no longer about that life. It went from sustainable energy to sustainable abundance to amazing abundance. And without these absolute staples of any successful paradigm shift, this battery is just another overpromise for tomorrow being strangled by an underdeliver of today. And I guess before we go, I need to address the questions I asked at the very beginning.
Why doesn't this thing have a solid-state battery?
Because solid-state batteries are at a technology readiness level around 4 to 6, and there are still major hurdles to address with the technology itself, let alone the manufacturing.
Why doesn't the new R2 have lithium iron phosphate?
The reality here is it still may get some trim levels with lithium iron phosphate, just as the R1 series did. But the reason NMC will be used at all is because there are so many patents tied up in China with LFP technology. And you may hear that tariffs are to blame, but it does not change the fact that China has cornered the market on lithium iron phosphate technology. And quite frankly, the same thing could happen with solid-state batteries if US companies and the US government doesn't show any interest or willingness to adopt.
How crazy are those donut claims really?
To the moon. To the moon. The shoe salesman at a centipede farm.
Why would you unveil a product at CES if no one's ever seen it validated? I'm rich! What does my uncle have to do with this?
Butts in seats.
Butts in seats. Butts. Is it particle size? Is it a capacitor? What's the difference between a battery and a capacitor? Why are all these questions so important?
I gave a month of my life editing, script writing, re-editing, and all the other fun stuff that comes along with making a YouTube video, just for this one publication. Let me know what you think about it down below. Let me know what I missed. Let me know what the next thing you think I should dive deep into should be. This entire video came from one comment from one viewer. I liked the angle, I liked the framing, and I liked the fact that they wanted to know what I thought. If you know of something in the EV space that needs that touch, put it down below. Join Patreon or become a YouTube member for early access to videos. Thank you so much for watching till the end. It means the world. Subscribe for more. We'll see you on the next one.
Hey! Smash the like button!
Thank you.